We are continuing this afternoon in our series on Matthew, and we're looking at new wineskins is the passage that we're looking at. And our Bible reading this afternoon is going to be brought to us by the TV show, The Chosen. I don't know if some of you have come across that. It's a fantastic TV show, and we're going to watch our Bible reading together. Fantastic, thank you. I don't know about you, but I would have been like one of those disciples being like, oh no, here we go. What sort of metaphor are we going to get next here? Now, when, I don't know, for those of you who do like presentations for work, or for those of you who are used to standing up in front of people and preparing and talking to people, there's a bit of a process that goes on when you start thinking about what you're going to say to someone. And I have to say that I don't think I've got a sermon for you this afternoon. I've got a series of reflections for us to go away and think about as we head up to our break over the summer. I should have checked this was working. Are we working? Oh, I've just turned it off. That might be why it wasn't working. Great. On a Sunday evening when I get home, what we normally do is we put the TV on. I'll put my feet on the sofa, and hopefully, if we're lucky, there'll be a David Attenborough show on. And if we're even luckier, after that, there'll be Antiques Roadshow. And then I'm a happy man. I've turned into my father. It's happened. I always told it would happen. That's the dream. That's the dream. I was watching one of those nature shows once, and it showed the life cycle of a snake and the vital importance in that cycle of the snake shedding its old skin. Skin that had gone dry, skin that had gone cracked, skin that wasn't fit for purpose anymore. So that picture's a bit creepy, isn't it? It's a bit creepy. The skin didn't just fall off the snake, though. The snake has to rub up against rocks, and it's a bit of a process. It takes time. It's not easy. To continue growing and moving forward, the snake has to get rid of its old skin. It had to change. And while we all know how much human beings love change, especially a sharp, sudden change, there's this great story, you might have heard of it before, of a minister who turns up at his new church. And this minister is maybe in his 50s, and he's the youngest person there by about 40 years. And in the deacons meeting, he says, I think we should move the organ to the middle of the church instead of having it on the side. And the people in the deacons meetings, we can't, it's been there for 94 years. We can't change it now. We can't change it and move it. So the minister leaves the meeting feeling deeply frustrated, thinking this is ridiculous. And week by week, over the course of about 30 years, he moves the organ about a centimetre a week. And eventually, it ends up in the middle of the stage. And all the people who didn't want the change had long died, so it didn't matter. I'm not sure that's a true story, but I heard it somewhere once. Change is hard. Change is hard. It's not something as human beings that we naturally lean towards. The Pharisees were stuck in their old skin, unable to shed it, unable or unwilling to change, unable to take on this new wine, this new teaching that Jesus was bringing, this radical way of living that Jesus was teaching about. Their old skin, their old frameworks for how they understood the world were not ready to hear this drastic message. And it wasn't necessarily their fault, I don't think. They'd had this way of thinking handed down to them over many, many years. Is there anything in our lives that we need to leave behind, to shed, to help us to continue to grow in our faith and move us to becoming more Christ-like? Reflection number 1. I'll read that again. Is there anything in our lives that we need to leave behind, to shed, to help us to continue to grow in our faith and move us to becoming more Christ-like? Ignore the text for now. This is the picture of me and my grandpa. My grandparents used to have a small cottage on Dartmoor, and we would spend loads of time there growing up as kids. And we were really lucky that we were able to use that. And sometimes just me and my grandpa would go on holiday, and we would go out. And he had a little boat in Plymouth Marina, and we'd go out for a couple of days at a time, pottering around on his boat. And many, many happy memories were made. Sometimes, I remember I was much older than that this time, but I remember going on a trip, and I must have been about 15 or 16, and we were sitting on the boat. It was evening, it was a beautiful evening, the sun was setting. We were just outside Foy. I don't know if any of you know Foy in Cornwall. We had sort of motored there from Plymouth, took a couple of days, and we'd been out, we had some food in the evening, and we got back to the little boat. And my grandpa said to me, and sorry, Mum, I didn't know you were going to be here this afternoon, but my grandpa said to me, do you want a beer? And I was about 15 or 16 at the time. Sorry, so I do not condone underage drinking. But he offered me a beer. I was like, well, obviously, I'm going to yes, please. So I took this can of beer, and I opened it, and I had a swig. And he looked at me in disgust. And he said, what are you doing? What are you doing? You don't drink beer out of a can. My mum's like that. You don't drink beer out of a can. And he handed me this very mug, which I've inherited when he passed away. He handed me this mug. He said, don't drink beer out of a can, you silly boy. We drink beer out of proper beer mugs. In his view, the beer is only worthy of the best mug. The bog standard can is no way to enjoy it properly. This new wine, the teachings and the way of life of Jesus, wasn't for everyone, especially those who are still drinking from the can. I know it's a tenuous link. Thankfully, we don't have to be the best mug. We don't have to be the best mug for this new wine. We just have to be willing and have a sense of awareness of God's great love for us. Reflection number 2. Are we willing to listen to Jesus and learn from him? But it can't stop at listening. To be disciples, we need to not just follow his teachings, but to seek to become like Jesus. We need to put down the can, our old way of understanding, and move to the new mug. Not an easy path to follow, but one as Christians that we are called to give our best to. Charlie, I don't know if you've already listened back to Charlie's sermon from this morning. And I'm not just saying this because he's my boss and he's sitting there, but it was an absolutely fantastic sermon. And he went into this in much more detail this morning. So I'd really encourage you to go back and listen again if you wanted to. But I wonder if the Pharisees were like the old wineskins because they had tried to limit God, tried to put God in a box. I like that picture I found. Come on, God, get in there. Picture of. They tried to put God in a box, never questioning anything, never wanting to shed their old skin, not allowing growth to occur, nice and neat and tidy in the box, keeping all their rules and systems in place. How often do we do that with God? Oh, I'll open the box on Sundays, or maybe at home group or at youth group, or maybe at a big conference that I go to. But the rest of the time, God, you stay nicely in this box where I feel like I'm in control. We were talking about this a bit at youth group on Wednesday. In the book of Exodus, in Exodus 3, verses 1 to 5, Moses encounters God in the burning bush, and God calls out from the bush, "Take off your sandals. You are standing on holy ground." I found this quote during the week. Moses has been tending his sheep in this region for 40 years. How many times has he passed by this spot? Has the ground been holy the whole time, and Moses is just becoming aware of it for the first time? Do you and I walk on holy ground all the time? But we're moving so fast and returning so many calls and writing so many emails and having such a long list to get done that we miss it. I think this was a moment for Moses of throwing away the box, realizing that God cannot be contained within a box, within our little rules and systems, cannot be contained within the old wineskins. If we take our sandals off and stop, we might just start to see God in the unexpected places outside of our boxes. We might realize that holy ground is not just on a Sunday, but can be found throughout the week too. I had one of those experiences this week, a moment when I realized that, wow, God's Spirit cannot be contained in our old wineskins, cannot be contained in the boxes that we put him neatly into. On Thursday, I joined with 65,000 other people at Hyde Park to watch The Boss, Bruce Springsteen. And it was one of the best nights ever. I got this cool cap. I got home at 2 a.m. and Susie said, Josh, Harry's been awake pretty much all night. Take that hat off, you look ridiculous. So, it's £35, this. I know it was a rip-off, but I got it. That's irrelevant. It was one of the best nights ever. I might even describe it as spirit-filled. Maybe even spiritual. A moment when you get lost in how beautiful the music is, how vast and wonderful the world is. Despite the obvious darkness, a clear example of how love wins, of how light can shine through darkness. And yet I know that feeling I experience watching Bruce Springsteen can be explained through science, can be explained through the endorphins that I experienced. There's countless studies to show the power of people gathering together to sing together. There's loads of scientific ways to explain that. But there's some things that science can't explain. We were standing on holy ground. When I was in the operating theatre and I was handed Harry for the first time, holy ground. When we gathered as a community here on Thursday to celebrate the life of Sue, holy ground. Oh yeah, some pictures. Can we become more aware of the holy ground all around us? Can we see that God cannot and should not be contained in a box in our old wineskins? So my three reflections for us to take into the summer. Is there anything in our old lives that we need to leave behind, to shed, to help us continue to grow in our faith and move towards becoming more Christ-like? Are we willing to listen to Jesus and learn from him? But it can't just stop at learning. To be disciples, we need to not just follow his teachings, but seek to become like Jesus. Can we become aware of the holy ground all around us? Can we see that God cannot and should not be contained in a box in our old wineskins? Just want to very quickly leave you with a little story of a guy called Brother Lawrence. Brother Lawrence was around in the 15th century, I think. Maybe this, I'm not sure. I can never work out. I can never remember. He was alive in 1612. Is that the 15th century? 17th century. Tim, thank you. Brother Lawrence, the 17th century. He was a monk at a monastery. And all the other monks were out doing like really interesting, engaging stuff in their community. And Brother Lawrence's task, his main role in the community was to be the dishwasher. So he spent a huge chunk of his life washing dishes. And he came to realize that washing the dishes, he could be just as aware of God's presence washing the dishes as he could be as the other monks were out in the community. He found that God's presence wasn't restricted to just those moments on a Sunday morning or a Sunday afternoon where we put aside whatever else we're doing and we maybe come to church and gather. Sorry. Oh my word. I never have my phone on loud. That's never happened to me before. Brother Lawrence realized that holy ground was all around him, that Jesus' presence was always there. As we sung in that song, help us to become more aware of God's presence around us. So that's my challenge, and my final thought for us today is, where can you be more aware? How can you become more aware of God's presence in our lives throughout our day-to-day week?